He shared his sandwich with an old lady in the park. But she wasn't just a stranger. The first time Daniel saw her, she was hunched over like a question mark life had never answered. He didn't mean to sit beside her. He just wanted to eat in peace away from the break room chatter, away from emails and Slack messages and the endless noise of marketing deadlines. The old oak bench under the sycamore tree had always been his quiet spot, a place where the world slowed down. But that day, she was already there. She sat at the far edge, her shoulders stiff beneath a beige cardigan that looked 2 decades too old. Her wiry silver hair was pinned in a crooked bun, and a canvas bag sat between her feet, bulging like it carried her whole life inside. She stared at the fountain ahead, unmoving, except for the occasional twitch in her hands. Daniel hesitated. He was holding a turkey sandwich from the deli around the corner and a bottle of iced tea. He figured he'd just eat quickly and probably leave before he even finished. He sat at the opposite edge of the bench, leaving a polite 2 feet of space between them. The minutes passed in silence. Birds chirped. Leaves rustled. A child squealed somewhere near the playground. And then he noticed her hands. They trembled not with age, but with something deeper. Nerves, perhaps. Or pain. Or fear. He tried not to stare. He looked away. Took another bite. But then, as he unwrapped the second half of his sandwich, he heard the softest sound from her. A stomach growl. Faint, but real. She hadn't moved. He glanced sideways again. Her eyes stayed on the fountain, but he saw her lips tighten, her jaw shift embarrassment. Without thinking too hard, he tore his sandwich in half and leaned a little toward her. Hey, would you like some? She didn't respond at first, just sat there like stone. So he waited. Then she turned, ever so slowly, and looked at him. Her eyes were gray, not the faded kind, but sharp, piercing like storm clouds just before they split open. For a moment, Daniel felt as though she could see right through him. Then she looked down at the sandwich in his hand. Her lips parted, just slightly. I couldn't, she said softly. Her voice was like gravel dragged across silk. You bought that. He smiled. I'm full already. Seriously. It'd go to waste. Still, she hesitated. Then, with almost painful slowness, she reached out, hands still trembling, and accepted it. She held it as though it were made of gold. Not greedily, not even gratefully. Reverently. And she didn't eat it right away. She just held it in her lap. For nearly a minute. Then, finally, she took a tiny bite. Daniel looked away again, giving her privacy. He sipped his tea. You're kind, she said after a while. He smiled again. You looked hungry. That's not the same thing. Silence. Daniel turned toward her again. I'm Daniel, by the way. She didn't answer right away. Then, without meeting his eyes, she said, Margaret. Nice to meet you, Margaret. More silence. He stood after a few minutes, gathering his wrapper and bottle. Well, have a good afternoon. As he turned to leave, she called out behind him. You're not like the others. He stopped. Looked back. Others. But she was already looking away again, her gaze fixed on the fountain. Like she'd never spoken. The next day, she was there again. Same bench. Same cardigan. Same canvas bag between her feet. This time, Daniel brought 2 sandwiches. You came back, she said as he sat down. So did you, he replied, handing her one. She smiled, just barely. The kind of smile that had been forgotten, maybe for years, and suddenly remembered itself. As days passed, it became routine. Daniel would arrive with food, and Margaret would be waiting. Some days she spoke. Some days she didn't. But slowly, piece by piece, she started to let him in. She never shared too much. But once, she told him she used to be a piano teacher. Another time, she mentioned that her son lived somewhere far away. She never said where she stayed at night. Daniel suspected a shelter, but she never confirmed it. He didn't press. She loved black coffee and hated mustard. She hummed old jazz songs under her breath when she thought no one was listening. And once, when a pigeon landed near her feet, she whispered, Hello, little survivor, like it was the most natural greeting in the world. Daniel started bringing extra food. Gloves. A blanket. A thermos. He told himself it was nothing, just kindness, just what anyone would do. But deep down, he knew it was more. She reminded him of his grandmother, who passed when he was 15. Of the way she used to sit with her back straight and her words sharp. Of how quickly age could strip someone of everything: home, safety, dignity, and how invisibly it could happen. Then one afternoon, Margaret wasn't there. He waited 15 minutes. Then 30. Then an hour. Nothing. She wasn't there the next day either. Or the next. The fourth day, he brought her favorite ham and cheddar sandwich, just in case. Still no Margaret. He asked around. The janitor at the park shrugged. You mean that old lady with the bag? Haven't seen her. Probably moved on. Daniel's stomach twisted. She hadn't struck him as someone who could just move on. Something was wrong. He found a local homeless shelter and asked if they'd seen her. No luck. He checked the hospital nearby. Nothing. That night, he barely slept. The next morning, he returned to the park bench again. This time, he sat down slowly. He looked at the fountain like she used to. The way she'd sit so still, so quiet, yet never at peace. And then something caught his eye. There, stuck in the slats of the bench, was a folded piece of paper. He pulled it out with trembling fingers. His name was written in delicate cursive across the front. Daniel. Heart pounding, he unfolded it. Daniel. I'm sorry I disappeared. I didn't want to say goodbye because I'm tired of saying goodbye. People come and go, and I got used to that a long time ago. But you weren't like the others. You saw me. Not the shell, not the shaking hands, or the dirty bag, or the cardigan full of holes. You saw me. And you fed me. Not just food. Hope. Dignity. I was afraid to tell you everything. But maybe you deserve the truth. My name isn't really Margaret. And I'm not just some old woman who wandered into your lunch break. There are things I've kept hidden for years, things I'm still afraid to face. But if you really want to know, if you really care, find me. There was no signature, no address, just one line at the bottom, written in shakier script. I used to live on Willow Street, house number 142. Daniel stared at the note for a long time. Then he folded it, put it in his jacket pocket, and stood. He was going to find her. Willow Street sat just 10 blocks from the park, but it felt like a different world. Daniel had passed it before, never noticing anything remarkable. A sleepy row of worn-out houses, most with peeling paint, fences overgrown with ivy, and porches that creaked in the wind. It looked like a street time forgot. He found 142 halfway down the block. The numbers on the rusted mailbox were barely legible. The gate leaned to one side, and the yard was scattered with dry leaves and an old tricycle, its red paint faded to pink. The house was quiet, shuttered, almost ghostly. He hesitated on the front steps. The wood groaned under his feet. He knocked once, then twice. No answer. He was about to leave when he noticed the curtain shift. Just a flicker quick, like a blink. He knocked again, louder this time. Hello? Is this Margaret here? I mean, I think her real name isn't Margaret, but... The door creaked open a crack. A single eye peeked out. Pale blue. Older. Nervous. I'm not selling anything, Daniel said gently. I'm looking for someone. She left me a note. Said she used to live here. The door opened wider. And there she was. Same crooked bun. Same sharp eyes. But now, under the yellow porch light, she looked even smaller. Fragile. Like the air itself could carry her away. I didn't think you'd come, she whispered. Daniel stepped closer. I didn't think you'd run. She opened the door fully and stepped aside. Then we were both wrong. The inside of the house was frozen in time. Floral wallpaper curled at the corners. A dusty piano stood silently in the corner of the living room. Shelves held faded family photos, all in mismatched frames. The air smelled of mothballs and something sweet like cinnamon and sorrow. She motioned to the couch. Daniel sat. She didn't. Instead, she moved slowly to the window and stood there, arms crossed tightly. This was my sister's house, she said. She died 5 years ago. I kept it. Don't ask how. I shouldn't have been able to. Daniel nodded slowly. Your note said your name isn't Margaret. A long pause. No, it's Eleanor. He let the name settle between them. It suited her somehow, elegant, strong. I wasn't lying about everything, she said, almost defensively. I did teach piano. I do have a son, but I haven't seen him in 12 years. Daniel waited. He didn't speak. He could feel the weight pressing against her ribs. I was a mother once, she said quietly. A good one. I packed lunches. I went to soccer games. I tucked him in every night. And then one mistake. Just one. Her voice caught in her throat. I trusted the wrong man after my husband died. He came into our lives like a savior. Sweet, generous, too good to be true. And of course, he was. He drained what little we had. He lied to my boy. Lied to me. Then one day, he vanished. Took our savings. Left a mess I couldn't clean up. She turned from the window, her eyes glistening. My son blamed me. Said I ruined his life. He was 17, and he walked out the door. Silence again. I tried to reach him. Letters. Phone calls. Even went in his college once, hoping I'd catch him. But he never answered. He changed his number. I gave up. Daniel felt his heart sink. You've been alone ever since? Not entirely. Her voice grew colder. There were shelters. Church basements. Couches of distant cousins. But people get tired of broken stories. Eventually, you become a burden. Eventually, you stop asking. He looked around the house. The quiet told stories of its own absence, of loneliness too long endured. But then, she said, her voice softening, one day I went to the park. Just to breathe. Just to feel like I wasn't invisible. She met his gaze now. And there you were. With that ridiculous sandwich. Daniel laughed. Just once. It broke the tension like a dropped teacup. I never thought I'd see you again, he admitted. I didn't plan to be seen. They sat in silence for a while. The kind of silence that doesn't need filling. The kind that feels like truth. Then she asked, why did you keep coming back? He shrugged. Because you mattered. Her lips quivered. Not with fear this time, but with something closer to awe. No one said that in years. The next weeks changed everything. Daniel came every afternoon. Sometimes to the house. Sometimes they still met at the bench, out of habit. He brought groceries. Cleaned up the yard. Helped her fix a broken step. She taught him to play an old jazz tune on the piano, laughing when he fumbled the keys. They told stories. Listened to records. Cooked together. He learned that she loved red licorice and hated reality TV. That her first kiss was in a movie theater during Gone with the Wind. That she once dreamed of performing in New York but gave it up when she became a mother. He also learned how deep her wounds ran. Some nights, she cried when she thought he was gone. Quiet, muffled sobs behind her bedroom door. Sometimes she'd ask him to read to Harold letters she couldn't bear to throw away but couldn't read herself anymore. Most were addressed to her. One was from her son, written before the silence began. It said, I don't know who you are anymore. Daniel hated that letter, but she kept it in a drawer like it was sacred. Then one day, he came to visit, and she wasn't at the house. Panic surged in him like a flood. He called out. Knocked. Nothing. But the door was unlocked. He stepped in. The living room looked untouched, but a note sat on the table, folded neatly. His name on the front again. Daniel. Don't worry. I'm okay. I went to find something I buried years ago. If I'm not back by evening, check the attic. B. It was nearly dark when he returned. Still no sign of her. With trembling steps, Daniel climbed the attic stairs. Dust swirled in the weak light of his phone. Old boxes. Stacks of books. A cracked mirror. And then, at the back of the room, a trunk. It was locked, but next to it sat a small envelope. Inside was a key. He opened the trunk slowly. Inside were dozens of items. Photo albums, sheet music, handwritten recipes, a child's drawing of a woman playing piano. One photo made him freeze a picture of Eleanor, younger, smiling beside a teenage boy with messy hair and eyes just like hers. The back read, Me and Ben. Summer before everything broke. Daniel's breath caught. So that was his name, Ben. Beneath the photo was a sealed envelope, addressed to Ben Callahan. No stamp. No return address. It was never mailed. But the handwriting was unmistakably hers. He took the letter and went downstairs, heart pounding. Waited. Watched the clock tick past 9. Then 10. Still no Eleanor. And just as he reached for his phone to call someone, Annie's door creaked open. She stepped in, her cardigan smudged, her eyes tired, but her expression radiant. I did it, she whispered. What? What did you do? I found him. Daniel froze. You been? She nodded, trembling. He's still in the city. Married now. Owns a bookstore. Tears welled in her eyes. I didn't talk to him. Just watched from across the street. He was locking up. He looked older. Tired. But safe. Daniel stood slowly. You didn't go inside? She shook her head. I couldn't. Not yet. He reached into his jacket and handed her the envelope. I think this belongs to him. Her fingers closed around it slowly. She looked at it for a long time. Then, quietly, she said, tomorrow. And for the first time, Daniel saw something in her that he had never seen before. Hope. Eleanor stood in the middle of her small kitchen that night, holding the envelope as though it might catch fire in her hands. She had folded and unfolded it a dozen times. There were creases across the middle now, soft bends from fingers uncertain whether to let go or hold on. Daniel sat at the table, watching her. Not pressing. Just there. She finally said, "What if he reads it and throws it away? Then at least he knows you still care." She nodded slowly, but didn't look convinced. They sat in silence again, but it wasn't awkward. It had never been awkward between them. That was one of the strange, beautiful things about this unexpected friendship, how quickly it became something real. Like it had been waiting to happen for years. "I was a good mother," she said after a while. "Until I wasn't." Daniel tilted his head. "You made a mistake. One." She laughed bitterly. "A big one. And then you spent the rest of your life punishing yourself for it. Haven't you carried it long enough?" Her lips parted, as if to argue, but the words didn't come. Daniel rose from the chair and walked over to her. "We can go together tomorrow. You don't have to do it alone." She nodded slowly, then whispered, "Okay." The next morning, the sun rose bright and almost unforgiving. July light spilled onto the sidewalks, coating everything in gold and glare. They stood across from the bookstore just after opening. The sign read Ben Callahan Rare Books. The front window displayed a rotating stand of vintage poetry and a poster for a local author event. Eleanor's hands trembled at her sides. Daniel glanced at her. "You ready?" She shook her head. But then, after a breath, she crossed the street. The little bell over the shop door jingled as they entered. The cool smell of pages and pine shelves wrapped around them instantly. It was quiet, peaceful. Behind the counter stood a man in his late 30s or early 40s. Tall, lean, hair darker than Eleanor's, but the same cheekbones, same deep-set eyes. He was organizing a stack of invoices and didn't look up immediately. Then he did. Their eyes met, and everything stopped. For a moment, Daniel wasn't sure Ben even recognized her. Then he saw the flicker, the breath catch, the confusion, and something else, something deeper. "Mom," the man said. Not loud, not angry, just stunned. Eleanor opened her mouth, but no sound came. Ben took a step forward, then stopped. "Is that really you?" She nodded. Ben turned his eyes to Daniel, who took a careful step back. "I'm just a friend," Daniel said quietly. "I'll give you two a minute." And he stepped outside. He waited across the street for over an hour. The sun climbed higher. People walked by. A dog barked in the distance. Then the door opened. Eleanor stepped out first, wiping her eyes. Ben followed, slower. He looked like a man who had been turned inside out and stitched back together in a single conversation. Daniel approached. Eleanor gave him a shaky smile. He read the letter. "Right there, in front of me." Ben nodded. "And then she told me everything else." Daniel didn't speak. He just looked between them. "I was angry for so long," Ben said quietly. "But part of me always hoped she'd show up." He looked at her again. "I didn't know if I could forgive. But maybe we can try." Eleanor nodded, her voice breaking. "I'd like that." Then Ben looked at Daniel. "You helped her." Daniel shrugged. "She helped me too." Ben stepped forward, extended his hand. "Thank you." They shook. And something about that gesture, simple, honest, felt like a door opening. That evening, they returned to the park. Eleanor sat on their bench, the one beneath the sycamore tree. A soft breeze drifted through the branches. "I used to sit here and imagine someone cared if I vanished," she said. Daniel sat beside her. "You don't have to imagine anymore." She smiled. "Neither do you." He looked at her. "I've been meaning to tell you," he said. "I never really had a grandmother. She died when I was a baby, but I always wished for one." She looked at him with such tenderness that it nearly undid him. "You've got one now," she said. And just like that, everything unspoken between them found its home. They watched the sun lower into the trees, its light curling around the edges of the world like a final breath before night. But this time, neither of them felt alone in the dark. Weeks passed, then months. What began as a quiet, cautious reunion turned into something steady, something sacred. Eleanor began visiting the bookstore every Tuesday and Thursday. At first, she just browsed. Then, slowly, she started helping dusting shelves, sorting old titles, greeting regulars. Ben never said much at first, but he didn't push her away. He watched her carefully, like someone trying to remember the shape of a language they once knew by heart. There were silences between them, yes, but they weren't empty. They were bridges being built. Step by step. Daniel kept visiting the park bench every few days, even when Eleanor wasn't there. Sometimes just to sit. Sometimes to think. It had become his place too now, not just a lunch spot, but a place of transformation. One Sunday afternoon, Eleanor invited Daniel over for dinner. She cooked pot roast in the slow cooker. The smell of rosemary and onions filled the tiny house. The table was set with mismatched plates and an old candlestick holder that hadn't held a flame in years. Ben came too. He brought a cherry pie from a bakery downtown. It was the first time the three of them were together in a setting that didn't feel like borrowed time. They ate. They laughed. They talked about books, music, old movies. "Do you know," Eleanor said at one point, "that when I was little, I thought Judy Garland lived inside my radio?" Ben chuckled. "You never told me that. You were too busy being obsessed with aliens and robots." "I was preparing for the future." Daniel grinned. "And look at you now, surrounded by dusty books." Ben pointed a fork at him. "Books are just another kind of time travel." Eleanor smiled softly. "Maybe that's why I've always loved them." Later that night, as Daniel helped wash dishes, Eleanor leaned against the counter, drying a plate. "I keep waiting for it to fall apart," she said quietly. Daniel paused. "What do you mean?" "All of it. The house. The peace. Ben. You. This second chance. I lived for so long expecting the worst that I don't know how to trust when something good stays." Daniel looked at her. "Maybe you don't have to trust it all at once. Just enough to take the next step." She nodded, her hands shaking slightly with the dish towel. "Every day I'm learning." "You're doing better than most." A long silence passed between them. Then she said, "What about you?" "What about me?" "You give a lot, Daniel. You show up. You listen. But what do you need?" The question caught him off guard. He set down the glass he was rinsing. "I guess," he exhaled. "I guess I needed someone to remind me that the world isn't all noise and deadlines. That people matter more than results." She studied him with those piercing eyes. "Did you lose someone?" His throat tightened. "My dad. Last year. Heart attack." "I'm so sorry." He nodded. "We weren't close." "Not really. But still it cracked something open in me." "And your mother?" "She lives upstate. We talk, but it's strained. Everything feels strained lately. Work. Life. Me." Eleanor reached over and touched his hand lightly. "Then maybe you and I are doing the same thing." "What's that?" "Relearning how to belong to the world." That summer melted into autumn. The trees on Willow Street turned golden, and Eleanor hung a paper wreath on her front door made of leaves she collected with Ben. She made soup from scratch and gave Daniel jars of strawberry jam with crooked labels. And then something unexpected happened. Ben invited her to Thanksgiving. For years, he'd hosted small dinners with his wife's family. But this time, he asked Eleanor to come. No conditions. No apologies. Just come. She cried when she got the invitation. "It's not just a meal," she said to Daniel. "It's a door opening." The night before the dinner, she sat at her kitchen table for hours, writing a card. A simple thank you note to Ben. But the words didn't come easily. When she finished, she sealed it with shaking fingers and placed it beside her purse. Daniel drove her to Ben's the next afternoon. He'd never seen her so nervous. Her dress was neat but modest, her hair brushed and pulled back with a little clip. She carried the card in a bowl of cranberry sauce she made from scratch, saying, "Even if they hate it, I made something." Ben greeted her at the door with a long, quiet hug. "You're here," he said. She nodded into his shoulder. "I am." Dinner was warm, loud, and full of laughter. Eleanor sat beside Ben's wife, Clary, a tall, kind woman with eyes that missed nothing and judged no one. Across the table, Ben's two young children giggled at each other over dinner rolls. Claire's father offered jokes. Her mother, a blessing. Eleanor looked like she might evaporate at any moment. But she didn't. She stayed. She passed dishes. She answered questions. She even told a joke of her own, an old one about a priest, a rabbit, and a typo in a blood donation form. It earned a laugh from everyone. Daniel, sitting quietly near the end of the table, watched her with quiet pride. It was like watching someone climb out of a grave they had dug themselves into, not knowing they'd ever see daylight again. Later, as they walked to the car, Eleanor said, "I don't remember the last time I laughed that much. You were amazing." I was terrified. Daniel opened the door for her. "You didn't show it." She smiled. "You know something, Daniel?" "What?" "I think I stopped being invisible." But life has a way of testing even our most fragile rebirths. It started with coughing, then fatigue. Then, one morning, Eleanor fainted in her kitchen. Daniel found her after she missed their usual walk to the park. He had a key now. He let himself in, called her name and found her crumpled near the back door, a half-spilled mug of tea beside her. The hospital was cold, too bright. Too quiet. Tests. Scans. Blood work. The doctor delivered the news gently, but the words still hit like a brick. Stage 3 lung cancer. Advanced. Aggressive. Eleanor listened in silence. Then she said, "How long?" "With treatment, maybe a year. Without 6 months. Maybe less." Daniel sat beside her, stunned. How could this happen so fast? The doctor shrugged gently. "Sometimes it hides. Sometimes people don't know until it's late." Eleanor didn't cry. She just nodded. "Then I suppose I'll need to decide how to spend what's left." Ben visited the hospital that night. Claire came too. The children drew her pictures crayon drawings of Grandma L with hearts and stars. She kept them in her lap, smoothing the pages over and over like they were made of silk. "I'm sorry," Ben said. She reached for his hand. "Don't be. I got something I never thought I'd get again." "What's that?" "Time." Eleanor decided against chemo. "I don't want to spend my last months in hospital beds," she told Daniel. "I want music. And tea. And sunlight. I want to feel the wind." So they brought her home. Daniel helped set up a bed near the living room window. The piano was nearby. Claire visited every afternoon with soup or stories. Ben read to her. The children brought her flowers and whispered secrets in her ear. Daniel was always there. Some nights, he slept in the armchair beside her. They talked for hours about life, about regret, about wonder. "I used to think I was a ghost walking through this world," she whispered one night. "But now I feel so alive, even in dying." He took her hand. "You gave that to yourself." "No," she said. "You gave it to me. With a sandwich." And when the end finally came, it was quiet. A winter morning. Frost on the windows. Daniel was holding her hand. Her last words were, "You were my miracle." And then she was gone. The funeral was small, but full of love. Ben spoke. Claire cried. The children placed sunflowers on her casket. Daniel read a passage from a book she loved about a woman who planted gardens in impossible places. Afterward, Ben handed Daniel a small envelope. "She left this for you." Inside was a note. "Dear Daniel, you changed my ending. And because of that, my ending became a beginning for Ben, for his children, for me. You once asked me what I saw in you. I saw light. Never let it dim. With love. Eleanor." Daniel stood in the cold cemetery air, the letter pressed to his chest. And for the first time in a long time, he wept. Not because of what was lost, but because of what had been found. 3 months after Eleanor's passing, the park bench under the sycamore tree was still Daniel's refuge. He came every Sunday now, without fail. Not out of obligation. Out of memory. Out of love. Sometimes he brought a sandwich, always ham and cheddar, no mustard. Sometimes he brought a thermos of black coffee. Sometimes he just sat, letting the wind stir the silence they used to share. It had become his way of keeping her close. The echoes of her voice still whispered in the breeze. Her laughter lingered in the creak of the bench. Even in death, Eleanor hadn't left. Not entirely. One Sunday in April, Daniel noticed something tucked between the slats of the bench, like the folded note she once left for him. But this wasn't from her. It was newer, cleaner. A small envelope, sealed with a single sunflower sticker. Inside was a handwritten note. "Daniel, thank you for loving my mother. Not many people did. Not many people even tried. You gave her something I couldn't, a reason to believe again. For the longest time, I thought she had abandoned me, that she'd chosen her mistakes over me. But your presence in her life, your care, it gave me permission to see her as a person again. I wish I'd had more time with her. But I'm grateful you were there when I wasn't. Ben." Daniel folded the note slowly, fingers tracing the edge as if it held warmth. He placed it back in the envelope and held it against his chest for a moment. Then, quietly, he whispered to the sky, "She forgave you, Ben, long before you ever asked." The next chapter of Daniel's life unfolded gradually, like a book you don't realize you've already begun. He started volunteering at a community center just a few blocks from Eleanor's house. They ran weekly lunches for seniors, people often forgotten by the world, left to sit in faded apartments and empty living rooms. He brought food, yes, but also time, conversation. He learned their names, their stories, their favorite songs. He met a man who'd once danced backup for Aretha Franklin, a woman who'd been a codebreaker during the war, a quiet veteran who cried when Daniel handed him a homemade peanut butter and jelly sandwich and said, "This one's for you." One afternoon, as Daniel helped set up folding chairs, a soft voice behind him asked, Are you the sandwich guy? He turned to see a woman in her late 60s with salt and pepper hair and kind, observant eyes. Maybe, he replied. Depends who's asking. She smiled. Martha. My cousin said you helped her mom last year. You brought her food in the park. Her name was Eleanor. Daniel's breath caught. She was my friend, he said quietly. She talked about you, Martha replied. In letters. Said you brought her back to life? They stood there for a long moment. Then Martha said, You ever thought about writing her story down? Daniel blinked. What? She told me once that stories were the only things that lasted, even when people didn't. So he did. He started writing at night. At first just notes, memories, phrases, bits of conversation. Then whole pages. Then chapters. The story grew like a tree from the inside out. It became a story about Eleanor. About forgiveness. About quiet miracles in loud cities. About the power of seeing someone really seeing them before it's too late. And when it was done, he didn't try to publish it. Not right away. Instead, he printed 5 copies, bound them simply, and handed them out. One to Ben, one to Claire, one to the community center, one to Martha, and one he placed beneath the sycamore bench, tucked into a weatherproof sleeve, with a note. If you're sitting here, you might be lost. So was I. Maybe Eleanor can help you too. Daniel. A year passed. Daniel was no longer the man he had been when he first offered that sandwich. He no longer needed to escape to the park to find peace. Because peace, somehow, had taken root inside him. He found joy in the quiet things. He left his job in marketing and began working full-time with a nonprofit focused on elderly outreach. He started a program called Lunch and Listen, where volunteers brought sandwiches to isolated seniors and simply sat with them. No agendas, just presence. The first week, they served 12 people. By the third month, over 100. One afternoon, Daniel received a letter in the mail. Handwritten, no return address. Inside was a photo of a young man, maybe early 20s, sitting on the same park bench where Daniel once sat. Beside him was an older woman, smiling, holding half a sandwich in her lap. On the back of the photo, a note. Dear Daniel, I found your book under the bench. I was having the worst day. I sat down, ready to give up. And instead, I found her. We've met here every Sunday since. Thank you for sharing her. A stranger who now believes in second chances. Daniel stared at the photo for a long time. Then he put it on the fridge, right next to the one of him and Eleanor playing piano on her last birthday. On what would have been Eleanor's 80th birthday, Daniel returned to the park. He brought 2 sandwiches. One he placed on the bench. The other he ate slowly, watching the light fade behind the trees. Birds chirped in the distance. A child laughed. Somewhere, a saxophone played faintly through a passing car radio. Daniel closed his eyes and smiled. He could almost hear her voice. You changed my ending. He whispered back, You changed mine too. And in that moment, in a quiet park bench, under a wide sycamore, 2 lives that had once collided by accident now echoed across 100 others. One sandwich. One stranger. One choice to care. That's all it took to begin again. The end.